thank you for joining today's official launch of the Liberia Economic Update. This edition, which is the fifth in the LEU series, focuses on putting a spotlight on the crucial role of reliable energy in fostering sustainable growth in Liberia and improving the quality of life of the Liberian people. The report looks at Liberia today and focuses on actions needed to realize the potential of Liberia tomorrow. As you know, Liberia has the ambition to reach middle-income status by 2030, with bold plans to deliver universal energy access as reflected in the National Electrification Strategy and the Rural Energy Strategy and Master Plan. The LEU assesses progress, challenges, and recommendations to hasten the achievement of this vital goal. Liberia has made important progress in the energy sector over the last 2 decades, scaling up domestic generation capacity nearly 6-fold, providing energy access to about 1/3 of Liberia's population, and instituting significant reforms. The Liberia Electricity Corporation has delivered impressive reduction of revenue losses, and that's a standout achievement at the regional level, while also lifting revenue growth. Step by step, Liberia is laying a foundation for better oversight and greening of the energy sector. Yet, as we also know, the challenges in the sector remain enormous, and time is of the essence. The LEU discusses priorities going forward. These include significantly lifting generation capacity and further enhancing the operational efficiency and financial condition of the utility to boost maintenance of existing infrastructure, invest in urgently needed new assets, and attract private investment. The World Bank is actively backing initiatives in Liberia's energy sector with strong focus on increasing generation capacity and expanding access. This is essential for driving Liberia's transition towards sustainable growth and development. Last year, the World Bank Group, together with the African Development Bank, announced Mission 300. This is a joint ambition to connect 300 million people in Africa to electricity by 2030. Our commitment to supporting Liberia's energy access agenda is rooted in our mission and spurred further by Mission 300. This June, the bank made an initial step forward since the announcement of Mission 300 in the approval of $450 million new investment, the second phase of the Liberia Electricity Sector Strengthening and Access Project, LESAP 2. Upon completion, the project will provide 494,000 more Liberians with new energy access. That's 14% of the current energy access gap. In total, we aim to reach 790,000 people with either new or improved access to electricity in Liberia. Together with the government and partners from the public and private sectors, we're redoubling efforts to reach the 6 out of 10 Liberians still waiting for energy access. This is urgent for Liberia's long-term sustainable development. Thank you again for joining us. Thank you also for your patience this morning, and we look forward to a very active and engaging session.
Thank you, Georgia, for your opening remarks. We will call on Mr. Kweke Tawo, our country economist and the main author of the report, to give his presentation on this new economic update, the 5th edition, with the theme, powering growth and reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy access. I think you all know the situation with energy in our country. So, where?
Thank you. Thank you very much. Let me stand on existing protocol. So this is the Liberia Economic Update. As you heard from the country manager, is an annual series of reports that shed light on recent economic development in Liberia. And on an annual basis, there is a selected thematic area. Last year, our focus was on the agriculture sector, and this year, our focus is on energy. So we are trying to look at the nexus between energy, assets, and how it'll be able to affect the lives of Liberians. So the theme is to power growth through reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy assets. So I'll begin with first looking at more like a snapshot of what the messages in the report is all about, and then we'll delve into the details of them. So I'll first look at the recent economic development. So for recent economic development, Liberia has grown in the last 3 years at an average of about 4.8%. However, this growth seems fragile because much of it comes from the mining sector. And mining sector, precisely gold mining. So massive production of gold has contributed, construction services as well has contributed, and some level of recovery in services as well contributed to the growth. However, there have been several macroeconomic vulnerabilities that the country has been exposed to. So we're saying that this growth that we've experienced in the last 3 years is fragile until we can be able to address some of these macro vulnerabilities. We might, at some point in time, probably lose it or go through some boom and bust. So that's the first message. So to be able to sustain the growth, there has to be a way that we address fiscal challenges, macro challenges in the immediate, in parallel to other structural programs that will be able to help to strengthen this growth over time. And considering the energy sector and its key role and how we know that it affects business activity, households, and so forth, we know that there have been tremendous strides in the sector in the last 2 decades, but more needs to be done. And having energy access is one thing, but making sure that it's affordable for people to have it, and also that it's reliable, that businesses can rely on it as well, will be important. So that's another message that come out. So we will sum up by looking at some of the pathways that we believe out of this assessment could be able to possibly take us on the journey of improved energy access, a reliable one. So for our first message, we looked at recent economic development. So I'll first talk about the context in which Liberia as an economy stood last year globally. So in 2023, all across sub-Saharan Africa, growth weakened. Liberia did somewhat better, but one thing that we saw is that there was receding commodity prices. Commodity prices were retreating, and it had implications for Liberia's growth. So we would have somewhat grown better, but receding commodity prices, we saw that it impacted rubber, it impacted oil palm or palm oil, it impacted iron ore as well. So that's why we spoke about the fragility of the kind of growth that we have, because if it is commodity driven and it's not as inclusive also, it may not probably be sustained. So this is the picture. So I already spoke about this, growth in the economy in the last 3 years driven by mining, besides the gold production. So that brings us to the fiscal issues. Last year, there were a lot, in the last 2 years actually, 2022 and 2023, Liberia experienced a lot of fiscal slippages, okay? So in 2022 and 2023, we saw that fiscal deficit for the government was extremely high. So in 2022, we had about 5.6% of GDP in fiscal deficit. And in 2023, that increased to about 7.1% of GDP. To a greater extent, fiscal deficit was unsustainable. Okay? And this drove our debt level. So our public debt climbed up to around 58.8% of GDP. So this is the picture of debt. Why debt remains sustainable? Recent assessment of our debt situation suggests that our external debt is at a moderate rates of distress. And for overall, we have overall high debt distress rates, and there's limited room to absorb shocks. And so when we are talking about limited room for absorbing shock, that means we cannot continue to have unsustainable level of fiscal deficit, and that will further trigger our debt to unsustainable levels. So, in terms of inflation, looking at prices last year, there was an increase in our inflation rate last year, 2023, and this was driven massively by a number of things, precisely food prices, exchange rate depreciation also fed in there. And then the fiscal deficit, which we told you was unsustainable, was monetized. And that also accelerated, the inflationary situation or pressures. So what the central bank did last year was to make sure that they maintain a tight monetary policy, which to a greater extent helped, to somewhat address the situation. However, we still hit 2-digit, and we recorded a 10.1% inflation from 7.6. But there's some positive stories in the financial sector last year. Vulnerabilities to a greater extent moderated. So asset quality somehow improved. Non-performing loans were down. And this has been one of the major issues in the financial sector. The level of non-performing loans have been very high. But what we saw last year, the tolerable level for non-performing loans, as set by the monetary authority, is around 10%. And last year, we were able to come down from around 16 to around 11, which is nearly around the tolerable level. So that was a positive one. And the banking sector remained adequately capitalized. But in terms of our interaction with the rest of the world, our current account deficit was really high, okay? It was elevated to somewhere around 26%, and what was driving this is, in as much as we experienced export growth, our levels of input were considerably high, okay? So our trade dynamics was the main driver behind that, and we had to finance this current account deficit or our external position. So to a greater extent, the financing of this was done through some IMF credits, through some loans, but also there were drawdowns on the official reserves, which brought our official reserves to just about 2 months of import, very low. To a greater extent, a better buffer is somewhere around 3 months of import cover. So how do we look going forward? So going forward, our medium-term outlook seems positive. So we are projecting that the economy is going to grow by around 5.3% this year and average around 5.6%. And some of the drivers of this outlook, we are looking at renewed interest in the mining sector again. But also, over time, we expect that other structural areas such as investment in education, investment in infrastructures, infrastructure. They are going to use some results also up to 2027. We expect inflation to remain low because what we've seen is the monetary stance has remained tight or restrictive over time. So if monetary policy and fiscal policy are maintained in a prudent manner, we expect to see inflation going down. And based on recent engagements with government and its commitment to fiscal adjustment, we believe that fiscal deficit is going to go down, reaching somewhere around 3% by 2026 to 2025 to 2026. However, our current account levels are still expected to remain high. And this is because there are inputs that will be related, to some of the foreign direct investments that we are expecting even in the mining sector. And these levels of input, are going to be at a growth that will somewhat outpace our export levels, within the medium term. But this positive outlook is subject to a number of risks. And one of the key risks I want to highlight is the issue around governance. So if there are weak institutions and weak governance across our institutions, it might undermine, this framework. If we continue to have fiscal slippages, like the last 2 years, we overspent. We understand they were election years, but we overspent on some entities, beyond budget levels and so forth. These fiscal slippages could undermine. And the fragility we spoke about, if there are fluctuation in some of the commodity that we highly rely on, if there are fluctuation in their prices, it could undermine the macro stability we intend to maintain and the growth as well. So that brings us to our second message. For us to be able to sustain the growth, we have to address these macro challenges and we have to address these fiscal challenges now while we continue to implement some of our structural interventions that we're having. So these are some policy options. You see the speedometer is telling you how it will go. So these are some policy options. So on the macroeconomic management side, we have to take a deliberate decision to not monetize fiscal deficit. We saw that monetizing fiscal deficit affected us in a way, accelerated, inflation level as well. We need to maintain low and stable inflation for there to be predictability and broad stability in the economy. We need to improve domestic resource mobilization because our needs are many. We have a lot of challenges and we cannot rely on overseas development assistance. Most of them are dwindling. And so there's a need for massive domestic resource mobilization to happen. So we see that quite recently there was the VAT law passed and there are other measures as well that could be explored. But we have to consolidate our expenditures as well. We cannot be overspending, beyond certain limits. Also, we need to do allocative efficiency such that we allocate in areas that will give us better gain. And there are existing systems that could strengthen our governance process, like electronic procurement processes, to be able to help us integrated public financial management systems that we have, like the IFMIS also. There's a need for us to start to use these systems in ways that are beneficial to us so as to somewhat help us to manage expenditure while at the same time, managing our debt sustainably. So that would be on the economic management side. But on the growth side, to be able to accelerate and maintain productivity growth and employment, there are a number of things we need to do. We need to continue to invest in education. We need, the kind of human resources or human capital that will deliver or use some results. We have to continue to address our infrastructure deficit. It's important for us to do that. And we need to upgrade our existing export base. And for us to be able to do that, it means that most of these structural issues have to be addressed, farm to market role, and linkages between the primary sector, which is the agriculture sector, and manufacturing and so forth. All of these things need to happen. So when we speak manufacturing, we know that energy will be needed, and that's why energy is so important to us. Governance, I already spoke about that. We need to make sure that our institutions are strong in ways that they support the kind of growth that we need. So that brings us to the topical area, powering growth with reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy assets. So the message here, the country manager already laid it bare. We've made strides in the last 2 decades, but the enormous challenges in the sector and more needs to be done. So I just thought to take stock of some of what has happened in the last 2 decades. We managed to increase our generation capacity. The CM mentioned that. But one thing also is that we managed to put in place infrastructure to leverage, import of energy. That's a big thing, okay? Because at first when we were in isolation, it's just domestic capacity we're relying on, but now we have opportunity also to import. So if you look at the energy mix that we had in 2023, 57% of it was coming from our hydro, the thermal energy 25, and we had opportunity to import about 18% of it. So increase in assets. So assets expansion, we came from under 10% and to about 30. In a recent population census that was done in 2022, the number is not yet, but it shows 33. And another success is the fact that we've been able to reduce, the cost of electricity in the last decade or so. So from 52 cents per kilowatt, we are now somewhere on average around 20 cents. Okay, so this, if you look at the first image on the left, you will see that with the reduction in tariff, we saw some level of improvement in revenue, which is somehow, but we saw improvement in revenue. But one of the things also is that we saw commercial losses going down. So once people can afford the power, there will be no need for power theft, okay? That's one of the messages that this picture sends. However, our cost of electricity still remains very high by regional standard. So if you look, selected countries we took, we're still up there, as compared to Ghana, that is somewhere around 6 cents. So despite this improvement, our power deficit remains extremely high. Okay, so I just took the 2022 number to be able to illustrate that. You see our supply, where our supply is from January to December, but you see where our peak demand is. So the peak demand hangs across above the supply. So what that tells you, all the white area you see shows that there is still a gap even with the current capacity that we do have. The assets improvement we are talking about, Monrovia or urban places are not Liberia, right? So we've seen an improvement in assets, but one of the startling revelation is that there is urban-rural disparity. So for the urban area, we saw improvement from 16% of the population there to around 50%. But in rural areas, we only saw a movement from 3% to 8%. And this 8% has been very flat. Okay. But overall, we came from under 9 to around 30%. And going outside and comparing ourselves to peer, we see that in West Africa, we are only doing better than Sierra Leone, Burkina Faso, and Niger. And we are about 10 years behind our peer average. We are about 10 years behind our peer average. We are now reaching 30%, of our population in terms of assets, when our peer average, low-income country average, was around 30% 10 years ago. So there's a lot of mar that we still need to cover, and far below the sub-Saharan Africa average of around 51%. So these gains, these challenges, what are the underlying factors that are holding back the sector? So we try to look at the underlying factors in 3 buckets. So the first bucket, we look at the lack of sufficient generation capacity. We'll delve into the detail. And the second, we look at the power utility, the state-run power utility, its operational inefficiency as well as the financial condition that it faces. Could be one of the factors, holding things back. The third is looking at limited private sector participation. Other than the LEC, I think on the 2 other operators, major operator had licensed the JEP, Jungle Energy Power, and the Total Electric Corporation. Okay, so we believe that these underlying factors need to be addressed, if we must make progress in the sector. So, generation capacity. When you look at our domestic energy mix, we are either getting from hydro or we are getting timber. So excluding import, we have 70% of our capacity with hydro and 30% of our capacity with timber. And this hydro that we rely on much more, this is the behavior of the hydro. Okay, so this picture you see, this is how the hydro behaves during dry and wet weather. So if you look at from January up to around June, we are well below our dependable capacity. The red line is our dependable capacity. And then when the rain comes, the wet weather, you see we go up. And this is how it's been fluctuating. That's the reason why during the dry season we face a significant energy demand that cannot be met because one of our major sources goes through this cycle. And this cumulates into a high level of unreliability. We see protracted period of blackouts, load shedding and all of that. And when you look at the numbers, you see in 2022, you look at the numbers, per customer we have about 423 hours, without energy. That's the duration, without energy per year. And that's been increasing from 2018, it's been increasing to this level. Then we come to the operational efficiency and the weak financial performance of the power utility. So LEC has been, operating at a loss. If you look in the last 5 years, the level of loss been increasing. Notably, in the last 3 years, there have been revenue growth, but also there have been expenditure growth or expenditure demands as well. So that's why you see the profit and loss picture looks like that. And on this side, what you're seeing is the total supply. You see the supply up there. But the commercial losses, even though it's down now, but you see the commercial losses constitute a significant portion. So to go through these losses, and on the technical basis also they face another loss. So technical losses last year was around 15% and commercial losses was around 31%. Combined, that would be a total loss of about 46 or so. So you supply a lot of power, you deliver the power to the home, technically because of maybe asset quality also, you lost. And then on the commercial side, there's power theft, non-metering, a lot of other things that drive the inefficiency as well. We know all of the problems to a greater extent, and some of them are things that can be solved in the immediate, but some of them are things that will require significant investment to be able to resolve. So for us to be able to deliver public service better, improve the well-being of people, and champion our cause for growth and economic development in ways that improve our economic or development outcomes, there's a need for us to get on a new path. So we've outlined here 4 key points that we think could broadly be a direction that we take, to be able to address our energy crisis or our power deficit. We think that there's a need for a robust electrification strategy that will be able to plan within the available resources we got and do as much as we can. We need to explore off-grid solutions. Find a way to have to heighten private sector participation in ways that will be able to reach out to as many Liberians as possible. We need to bolster the operational efficiency of the utility. It's clear that we need to do something there about it, and that will require a revenue protection program. They're already on the path of doing that. We saw that there was massive improvement in revenues in the last 2 years or so. This has to be complemented with customer service. A lot of people complain that, we don't get the kind of customer service that we need or so forth. And metering has to happen. All of these bits and pieces, all of the things that are driving inefficiency, the utility will best know that there's a need to be able to address them to massively bring our loss down, in ways that they are profitable, because when they become profitable, then they will have the opportunity to extend, also. So, looking at the regulatory environment, also there's a need for strengthening it. To be able to attract the private sector, there's a need for you to have, an improved regulatory environment, that will be attractive enough to have private sector coming in to participate. And lastly, there's a need. We have a number of projects. I think the country manager mentioned one, and there are future projects as well. We need to accelerate the implementation of those projects to make sure that we can reach far and wide across the length and breadth of Liberia in ways that our electrification agenda will help drive our growth and development process. Thank you. So that's the link to the report. Thank you very much.
Before going further into our panel discussion, I would like to recognize the presence of Honorable Tannen G. Bronson, the Deputy Minister of Finance for Budget and Development Planning, who is here representing the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning. So we'll now call on Honorable Bronson to deliver her remarks before we proceed further. Welcome, Madam.
It is a great honor to represent the Ministry of Finance and Development Planning at this important event marking the launch of the 5th edition of the World Bank Economic Update. On behalf of the entire ministry, I want to express our deep appreciation to the World Bank for this unwavering support and partnership with the government of Liberia as we continue our journey towards economic recovery and sustainable growth. The theme for the day, powering growth with reliable, affordable, and sustainable energy access, could not be more timely or relevant. Energy access lies in the heart of Liberia's development agenda. We recognize that energy is not just a sector on its own, but a driver of growth, productivity, and development across all sectors of our economy, from agriculture to manufacturing, from education to health, from the private enterprises to public services. Reliable and affordable energy is essential for powering Liberia's economic growth and improving the livelihoods of our citizens. As we have seen in other countries, investments in energy infrastructure are key to unlocking the full potential of industry, improving competitiveness, and creating jobs. Energy access is also a fundamental enabler of human development, improving health services, education outcomes, and the quality of life. Despite these clear benefits, we remain acutely aware of the challenges Liberia faces in this sector. Our energy infrastructure, though improving, still struggles with issues of reliability, affordability, and coverage, particularly in rural communities. Expanding access to reliable energy remains one of our foremost priorities. It is our hope that this economic update, well, it already did, the economic update has provided us with a valuable resource to further understand the current state of our energy, the energy sector, and the broader economic landscape. By analyzing economic development and providing insights into how energy access can fuel economic growth, we expect the update to lay a solid foundation for informed policy making as we chart the course towards sustainable development. We thank you.
Before we can start our panel discussion, we will call on the moderator, Mr. Mike Kipat-Molba, who will come up here. He's our senior social protection specialist. Mike?
Let me commence by thanking all of you for joining us on this panel. And I want to begin the panel discussion basically with a few notes. The economic update, as we've seen over time, helps us to start the discussion. It is not in itself mutually exclusive and exhaustive in terms of all that we put out here for the discussion, but what we hope to get from it is to kind of spice things up so that we have something to discuss. Most of the facts that we put here, or most of the analysis that we put out here, is based on available data that we're able to draw on. So why do we have the panel? This panel is aimed at further deconstructing all of the things we put in there and going into the discussions and maybe a little bit hitting each other to the extent, look, let's demystify the myths, let's re-emphasize the messages, let's highlight the opportunities, and let's pick out the paths that we think do not align with the path we want to go to, or that we think clearly light out the way we should go. So on the panel here, I have some experts, and we hope we have opportunity for the audience to interact as well. Let me find out from Michael, will the audience be able to interact with our panelists?
Well, let's start.
Okay, so we're going to do 2 rounds of questioning with the panelists, and then we'll see if we still have time to bring you in. So, not to delay things, I want to start with the Honorable Minister. Honorable Deputy Minister, I think in your opening remark, you said this discussion could not have come at a better time. And I do agree, because we're at a point where we have ended one national development plan. We're starting another, which is the Arrest Agenda for Integrated Development. And we're at the point where the bank, as you heard from the country manager, is embarking on Mission 300. So this is a perfect time to see how we bring all of this together in our next NDP. And of course, with the World Bank coming with a new country partnership framework, these are all opportune moments. So, Honorable Minister, from your side of things, I think one thing that came up clearly in the report was the need to use existing systems, but also the need to invest in LEC if we're going to make energy viable. So here's the thing, and message number 2 from the presentation of Roy highlighted that. So I want to ask, Liberia's current fiscal challenges show that we have a deficit of 7.1% GDP in 2023, and of course we heard it went up to 10, but we'll stick on the 7.1. And we have some existing systems. We just wanted to know, what steps does the MFDP plan to implement to improve domestic revenue mobilization, particularly with the introduction of the VAT, which we see as a critical instrument for revenue generation starting in 2025. How would this align with controlling public expenditure, especially recurring costs?
Thank you. Since I'm the only government person here, I feel like a sitting duck. But anyway, I will try to answer the questions. Yes, this sector is very critical, and it has been one of our greatest challenges. The need for electricity cannot be understated. We find the challenges in every sector, whether it's public or private. I think one of the major challenges has been the accessibility to whatever is available. There are instances where situations around the country don't even have the access, where we don't have connections. We are also looking at possibly developing solar farms to complement what is currently being produced and what we also have through the CLSG arrangement. In terms of tax measures to fund these initiatives, the MFDP is exploring a few options, including some sin tax on certain services or activities like in the for alcoholic beverages and certain items there will be either sin tax. Also, we're looking at improving. We're supposed to be rolling out a decentralization plan starting next year, and so individual counties will have their budgets decentralized, and several ministries will have it decentralized. So we're also looking at I mentioned the issue of solar farms. So we can you ask? Yeah, the decentralization. Okay. So then, we hope that at the county levels, we have to build the capacities to be able to undertake some of these services themselves, so that everything won't be left on the central government. We will be rolling out to 13 counties, and I think 11 institutions will be decentralized, including the LEC will also be decentralized, so that they can be able to provide those kind of services to people in those counties.
But with the VAT, do you intend to give any portion of that revenue? Do you intend to commit any portion of that revenue you're going to generate in 2025 to expansion of energy? Is there any quota now being thought about?
Yes, it will be dedicated towards that, a certain percentage, but that amount has not been determined yet.
Okay, thank you, Honorable Minister. I want to jump straight to the private sector, Mr. Trawale. When we talk about revenue generation, domestic, we're looking at the businesses. We're looking at the private sector, because government doesn't generate much tax from itself, if it ever does. But we're looking at you. You bring in the monies and you help us. Now, the way you do this is from your profits and from your business. And message number 3 clearly states from what Gwe said here, the challenges, the on and off power. So we're wondering, given the frequent electricity outages, the high costs associated with unreliable power supply, how has the current condition of power sector impacted your business operations regarding production cost, profit margins, pricing strategies? What measures have you taken to make sure you survive in this very difficult context?
All right, thank you very much. I said to World Bank organizing this program, I'm very happy and I'm very delighted and to be here. And I know supposed to be here at this time, but I changed my flight because I really need to give you this message. And in terms of the private sector sustain in the business. And I did this analysis since I started my production 2013. And I also relocated to Bonafide one time. And I have the LEC 2021 on November. And from 2013 and up to 2021, and I was using the generator. So when I received the LEC in 2021 and November, and I begin to know the differences of the cost. And I do this analysis, and 2022, I got up of this. This is what I have here, and the cost was very huge. If you see it, it's unbelievable, and it costs you to not to be reliable or paying taxes. You will not be paying taxes as the way the government expects it to be, because your productions will not be more effective. And also it will be a challenge that for many people to begin a business here in Liberia. For 2013 to 2021, my loss was $586,000. When I use a generator or LEC, if I could use LEC, I'm supposed to spend $216,000. So I believe the $560,000 and what I coming from as my begin for business for $200 to the manufacturer level. So I believe for anyone have $586,000, we can able to have more than 1,000 employees. Because when I start my business, $200, and today where I'm at, and if I'm also spending of $586, without no reason, and again, I'm obligated to pay the taxes. So many reasons why, even when the presentation was given, the bank and a lot of things that, cause of this, but the LEC have more impact to play in. My workforce is just about 150, and just a small business. If this can produce 586,000, then can you imagine other companies will be talking about millions? Then the government agencies, the other places. So the LEC, I believe, is more important into our revenue. If LEC is stable, I believe that whatever the poverty, and we also have two challenges in LEC. The time to make business, and that's the time they are off. Because we have two seasons in Liberia. We have January to April and May. And if we can recall from January to April, it can be LEC. And that's the time that we can make money. At this time, we don't make money and the LEC is available. So that's a very challenge for us.
Thank you, Mr. Trawale, and thanks for the data point. I think we should give the microphone to LEC because you just put them on the spot. And Mr. Kwapena, I'm sorry, but you heard Mr. Trawale. He's losing about $320,000 without you. And yeah, you're $586,000 without LEC, about $200,000 with LEC. So if we subtracted that, that's about three. So okay, so $500,000 you're costing him, and he's telling you now, in terms of investment, he could have reinvested this, expanded his business, employed more Liberians, be more efficient in helping to generate more revenue through VATs that will now recircle into LEC. But part of the challenges we're picking up here, let me go back to what I saw from the report. Part of the challenges we're picking up here from message number 3, it says you have very, very high losses, 46%. That's about 31% commercial losses, and then 15% technical. So from your point, what steps are you taking to make LEC reliable in terms of reducing these losses and making the corporation more sustainable?
Thank you very much, and good morning to all of us. And thank you for giving us a thumbs up. We need reliable power, and I think that message has been sounded enough. We need an LEC and a power system that can support our economic programs, that can support our education, and that can provide power in our homes. Over the years, let me say that 4 years ago, LEC's commercial losses were 51%. Last year, by the end of the year, it came to 31%. The report is accurate in saying that we have seen electricity prices dropped. That's true. We dropped from 53 cents per kilowatt hour to 22 now per kilowatt hour since 2022. But last year, the drop in commercial losses alone was 10%, which means that since there was no tariff drop last year, and that the same tariff that was in 2022 was what was in 2023, something else is happening beside the drop in electricity prices. It means the management is taking the supply of power seriously. The management is taking the financial viability of LEC and building its capacity to provide reliable power seriously. If you take the report gave the outage figures for 2022, which was 433 hours last year, we dropped that figure to less than 100 hours, partly because we are connected to the CLSG network, so we had enough power to supply during the dry season. So I'll come to the dry season, the wet season issue, but the management is working to reduce losses, and we are continuing to do that. Commercial losses, what is it? They are energy that is consumed but not paid for. There are two sources of that customers are connected to the network and they are not metered. They connect themselves to the network and they are not metered. The other source is that they are metered, but they have found ways to bypass the meter in various ways. So sometimes they are not paying for it at all, and other times they are paying less than they ought to be paying for. And our programs, you have been hearing about us in the press, the anti-power theft program we have two main goals: to meet our customers, and also to find ways of locating those who are deliberately bypassing the meters. Last year alone, we installed 37,000 meters on unmetered connections. 37,000. We initially started that program ourselves. For the first time, LEC bought its own meters, 5,000 meters to connect. And then we got support from the World Bank. We got 100,000 meters last year from the World Bank that we earmarked for another program, an extension program. And we have taken some of that and connected customers. So the data we got from last year, January, show clearly that of all the people who are connected to the network, who are stealing power, who are not paying for power, 98% of those were directly connected to the network without meters. So we've addressed that, and we are addressing that. To continue that program this year, we signed a framework agreement for meters. So we have 250,000 meters that we have signed to bring in, and our staff just came back from the factory acceptance test to verify that the meters are good, and soon those meters will be arriving in the country. So we're connecting that. And under another program sponsored by the World Bank, LASAP 2, we are bringing in what we call smart meters. These are intelligent meters that can give us information whether customers are tampering with the meters or not, stealing power or not. So we bring in this one under the program. And we have other programs that we are implementing to ensure that financially we are recovering the money that should be coming to LEC.
But Mr. Kwekwana, let me push you a little bit. You're talking about all of these smart meters. You're talking about everything. Few things that are still standing out here are your rates, your tariffs are not going down. By West Africa standard, LEC is still higher. That's one. The next thing is, with all that you're talking about, how many connections you want to do, how many new connections, you're not winning any case on power theft, and critics say it's because you're working alone. For instance, when you come to KYC, know your customers. How many of your customers do you know? Where do they live? There's no public address system here that's functional now where you can say somebody lives on 58 Broad Street, that property is owned by Jerry Brown, and so by default I know Jerry Brown, and if anything happens on 58 Broad Street, I'll hold Jerry Brown responsible, so Jerry Brown is responsible to hold the tenants in the house responsible. So they're saying, LEC, you're just running alone, and you think you can win this marathon, and that's part of your problem. The next thing is, with all that you're discussing, you still have a huge urban-rural divide, that you're focusing more on Monrovia, and you're forgetting that the rest of the country needs power and energy, so there is this whole divide. How do you address those?
Thank you very much. Yes. Prices down from 53 cents per kilowatt hour to 22 cents per kilowatt hour, which is a great achievement. But we know that compared to the West African average, that is still high. We know that. But the fact remains that that is still below the cost of producing the energy. It is sad, but that's true. And that's driven mainly by demand and investment in generation. Okay, so let me illustrate that a bit. 5 years ago, when the dam was rehabilitated, only one turbine could supply the whole country, only one. But we have expanded the network and expanded to many parts of Monrovia and even beyond Monrovia. Last year, we connected all the way to Arahayu. Now, with that expansion, demand has grown. Last year, during the wet season, we were exporting power to Cote d'Ivoire. This year, just before I left and came here, the demand is flat, above the capacity of the hydro. So even in the wet season, we need to import energy to supply, and that is cost. Hydro is 6 cents per kilowatt hour. Import is 16 cents per kilowatt hour. If I generate using thermal, it's 27 cents per kilowatt hour. It means that as demand increases, the cost is increasing. But we expect tariff to come down. So we need to match what is coming in with what the price at which we are selling it. So it's high, we know that, but it's still above cost. Below cost.
But don't you think you can recover some of this if you're able to address the commercial losses? Because
exactly.
if you have, this thing should go according to elasticity, right? If you have more customers connected, you should be able to raise more revenue and be able to cover up for some of these. But how are you telling the story that you have more customers connected, but still your cost is higher and your cost is not coming down? So these are some of the areas where critics are coming. I know we're getting hard on LEC, but because this update says powering growth of reliable and affordable and sustainable energy access.
Let me address the urban-rural divide, then I come to that. But the fact is true, and the reason we're talking about financial stability and commercial loss reduction is that the more we recover, the more we cover our cost. So we're working at that. But as the network grows beyond Monrovia, the cost of production goes up. Okay? When I extend the network, my capital cost goes up. But we know that there's no country in the world that the utility is the one investing in the expansion of the network. The government or the state has to contribute and support that. And we are working with the state to make sure that that extension continues so that we reduce the gap between the urban centers and the rural centers. But we cannot neglect the urban center because the bulk of the finances to support the expansion of the network to the rural area will be coming from the urban center. So everywhere you focus your attention on the center, the load center, and then you develop the network from that outward to the rural areas. Concerning the rural areas, we have not neglected that. I can assure you. One of the things we are doing is to bring in the private sector. The report mentioned JEP and Total Distribution Company. Last year, we brought in another private sector operator, Lib Energy, that is in the Maryland area. So we are extending the network using public funding, but once it is extended, we give the operation and the additional expansion to the private sector, so that the private sector working together with the public sector, we are increasing access in the rural areas. Over here, we are also experimenting now. We have a pilot program on outsourcing retail so that we give the metering and expansion and the control of commercial losses to the private sector. And once that is successful and we can prove that the returns are good, we're going to expand that and convert that into another concession. So LEC is working to support the government in access expansion, in improving reliability, in financial stability. We are aware of what our role is. We also want the government to support us as we try to support to achieve these goals. This is important because we recognize the crucial role of power, electricity in development.
Thank you. Let's bring in Mr. Sakib, since you are asking for assistance now. Let's go to the big money, the World Bank. Mr. Sakib, given all of these challenges we've just narrated by LEC, high losses, inefficiencies here, there, LEC being both judge and executioner by generating power, distributing it, and then retailing it. All of these various challenges, LEC has told us, look, we can cut some of these down if we get more support and we are able to outsource some of these, decouple some of these services that we are providing. What's the plan of the World Bank to intervene in this and making sure that LEC is investing not just in expansion, but in energy sources such as renewable, that is more sustainable and that efficiency is improved across the whole LEC system? Because I don't see how anybody else wants to invest in a business that's got 46% losses on its books. So what's the plan?
Thank you for the question. So World Bank is deeply engaged in the Liberia energy sector with LEC being the main counterpart.
Microphone. Maybe you need to bring it up a little bit. Yeah.
Okay. So LEC is the main counterpart for our engagement in the energy sector. And the way bank is engaged is that we are not only looking at the immediate challenges, some of which we discussed, but also we have a long-term view on the sector as well. So on the generation side, because this seems to be an issue, immediate issue, and the World Bank funded Respite project. I think there was a solar PV contract that was signed recently in July. So that will be the first solar project in Liberia that has been signed. And building on that thing, because public resources are limited, so next phase of solar, 70 megawatt, we want to work with the government, LEC, to mobilize private capital. So this will not only, reduce the cost of generation, because it will avoid thermal generation, CLSG to meet the demand. It's all cleaner, affordable part of as well. In parallel, we are also looking at expanding. We saw the benefit of hydro, all the benefits that you see in cost reduction came from Mount Coffee. So there is, we are preparing with LEC, with the government on Mount Coffee extension. But I think the ultimate objective is to build the capacity. So we start with solar, Mount Coffee extension. LEC will grow as an entity as well during this phase. It has already been growing, commendable performance. So basically it's bidding for larger undertakings, right? Upstream of Mount Coffee, you have good potential on the St. Paul River. St. Paul 2 hydropower project is under preparation. So combining all this, you will see driving LEC. And another thing, because it has been coming up in the discussion on the access and urban-rural disparity. Georgia mentioned this Mission 300, and I'm proud to say that Liberia is one of the 12 countries that has been selected to prepare its national compact. So it's basically going to be a strategy document that will have a path towards achieving universal access by 2030. And not only that, it will help mobilize additional resources, whether it's public or private. And this is part of our engagement on this agenda. So it's, I think, something which is new. Liberia was one of the first countries where we have a programmatic approach. So it's not a project, it's a program. LESAP, Electricity Sector Strengthening and Access Project. So it's more of which shows one strong commitment in the Liberia to improve access. LESAP phase 1, based on successful performance of LESAP phase 1. LESAP phase 2 has been approved and will be effective. And the total allocation for LESAP is about $200 million. So it's a programmatic approach, but it is basically the reason the program is doing well is because of the LEC performance. So we have seen reduction in commercial losses, improvement in revenue, and I must commend LEC that they have been able to maintain this while expanding, which is, I think, really commendable.
Oh, thank you, Sakib. Some people would have thought you probably would have said a little bit about LEC's much screamed about expansion, St. Paul 2, to say, hey, once we have that upstream, we can give half the country power. And then linking that to what renewable energy authorities are doing, RREA, and what other people are doing. What's the bank's take on support to the energy sector in the next 5 to 10 years? What do you see? How do you see us going? Let's take not just LEC, but let's just look at support to the energy sector.
Yeah, so thank you for branding. So LEC is one, but definitely LESAP has RREA as well as a major counterpart. And the way the funds are allocated, so it's equal, right? So we have RREA as a main counterpart looking at the off-grid space, where we have not just solarization of schools and homes, but also to bring more off-grid and solar home systems as well, mini-grid, and working on a model where private sector can come in as well. So definitely, it's a multi-pronged strategy approach. We look at the generation, we look at the utilities which are needs to implement, and but the ultimate focus is that consumers are benefiting from all that we are doing.
Thank you. So we've heard from the bank about LEC performance. Performance is what brings in all of these actors to pay attention to you. But with all that you're asking government, and government right now, domestic revenue mobilization is very low, and they're trying to up it. So let's come back to Ministry of Finance and Development Planning, since they interact with the international partners. Madam Minister, as you're aware, when the donor community puts together a program for a country like Liberia, a few things come in there. For the World Bank, some of the terminologies around CPIA, for people who are not familiar, is country performance and institutional assessment. They try to look at how governance is going, how financial management, and all of these things come together to give Liberia a score to say Liberia will be able to access this amount of money in aid. Over time, from the report, there's been some challenges. For instance, the report indicates spending increase in 2023 due to expenditure overrun. Now, all of these fiscal deficits remain elevated both in 2022 and 2023. So going forward, we've seen investment in a lot of systems like IFMIS, which is this integrated financial management system. We've seen investments in e-procurement and so forth. The question is, what's the MFDP's plan to use all of these systems and make sure that there's fiscal constraint or restraint, and there is some plan to move in the right direction going forward, so that all of these different aspirations that we have, from whether it's LEC or whether it's from roads and so forth, that we're able to bring our partners to the table and say, look, we have systems, we're using them, they're working to our advantage, they're tracking how much VAT taxes and revenues we're getting, we're also managing budgets wisely, and we're doing procurement through an open and transparent method. What's the MFDP's plan in this direction? Because it's critical to getting LEC to that point of accessing the 200 million through the program. Over.
Okay, I'm sure you're aware that we're in the process of preparing our development plan for the next 5 years. There has been a lot of challenges over the years, and we're trying to see how we can mend those challenges. The agenda that the new leadership came on is arrest, and energy is a key factor in that plan.
So they're going to be arresting more power theft people?
Yeah, so we know the challenges that exist. Sometimes they're difficult to manage, especially when it comes to, I'm in charge of the budget. So I experienced a lot of challenges. I think over the years, one of our main concern, or what we haven't done well, is the time that we took to prepare the budget. It has been done not giving enough time for institutions to actually think about what they want to do. So during the course of the budget execution, we find requests coming in for things that were not budgeted. And hence, that's why you find some of those excesses in certain areas. But we're trying to control it now. We're working with the institutions. The new management team that came on board in terms of the government, we've had workshops to acclimate them with some of the policies so that they're aware. We're working with them to make sure that those expenditure items that are key to the operations needs to be budgeted. And we're trying to make sure that they will be allocated in the budget. But notwithstanding, there are many, the state of our country right now, there are instances where, like for example, what we had the returnees from, repatriate our citizens from Ghana. Some of those items are not budgeted for. If emergencies like those come out, obviously you see excesses in certain lines. So we will try our best to see how we can manage it with, in terms of policies for the request for the execution. We have the PPCC will be there too to make sure that we enforce the procurement process, reporting, and manage to make sure that everything is done according to what should be done.
Thank you, Honorable Bronson. I know you talk about emergencies and you use the example of the refugees. Still, people could argue that we knew we had refugees out there that will have to come home one day. So the fact that we just jump up today and made it an emergency, it's not an emergency, but it's something that we didn't plan for. People will still make the argument that some of the things that are happening now, we're hearing in the media about budgets and how they're managed. People will say, we still have systems. I want to come back to the whole thing of systems. How are we using IFMIS? How are we using budget modules? How are we using available systems, e-procurement, to ensure that for the next national development agenda, we're tracking these things in a more transparent way through these systems? Because they're there. But I think most of the argument is that we're not using them.
To an extent, you are right. And we have systems. The budget module will be introduced this year. In the past, the way the budget, for some of those who don't know, the budget module will be used to develop the budget. We have a bespoke system that we use to develop the budget, and then once it's developed, then it's uploaded onto the IFMIS. But now we have a seamless process where it will be developed on IFMIS and executed on IFMIS. But one of the challenges we have is on reporting when it comes to institutions. Many of them don't like to report. And then sometimes there are delays. You know, when you hear the same Ministry of Finance is not distributing or not giving money, some of them don't request. The only items that we process automatically is for compensation and compensation-related expenditures. For other expenditures, they have to put in a request. They have to follow the PPCC procedures, and if they don't do it, they won't get. So those are things that we need to enforce. I'm glad that PPCC now has the e-procurement, which should be very helpful for us. But the reporting component has to be a part of our system, and not only that, but also monitoring and evaluation.
Thank you, Madam Minister. So let's go to Mr. Trawale. You hear all these big numbers, 200 million, 500 million, 700 million into LEC. You hear all these things, tariff draft, tariff. How do you think they're impacting the ordinary people? You live in a community with them, they buy your produce. I mean, what's happening there? Do you see any impact? Do you see improvement in their lives? Are they coming and say, I'm able to buy 5 packs of tissues today because I'm not running my generator anymore, I'm on LEC? Or are they still crying that even with LEC, no better, they say in Liberia?
Well, I think my last comment was we have 2 seasons. We have the dry season and we have the rain season. And we interacting with the community than any other person daily basis. And we also understand their message than any other person. And during the dry season times, that you will find many indigenous Liberians are into business, meaning when it comes to the water production, cold water, and some other people, they just feed us back, and they're where they prepare themselves to pay their children's school fee at this time. Now, but at that time, that's not LEC available. I listened to the LEC boss, and he said Google Teams, and I wish, of course, that if those things is implemented, that he will see the many changes in the community, even if it comes to the payment of the revenue. The revenues are also struggling. They say, well, they are not meeting with their dispatch. When they are targeting a certain amount, like we listened to the ARA boss last week, he said that the only area that they are most focusing on get more revenue, it was marital and also the transport sector. And if you look at that 2 sectors, they don't have any much related to LEC. But you've forgotten to know that, these other businesses, manufacturer, and this small market area, they have more also revenue, even more than the marital, or even more than the transport. Okay, because if you look at about 5 million population, they do interact with those products than even the marital. The marital money you only receiving because of the bulk, because of the other countries that are connecting to your network, and that is why that you are getting the huge amount of money. But the other people that you live for them daily basis, your focus has to be with them. Then if we see other countries like Ghana, we're also having the same struggle problem, the electricity. But today, they have grown faster because they are focusing on their power energy. It will make the small entrepreneur will grow faster than to just leave them undone. And I also listened to the World Countryman, the World Bank manager, director, and that he also trusts LEC, and we are also encouraging them to empower LEC. And if any reason that we can also have other powers or other energy to join LEC, it is about to win. It's not about LEC, it's not about the private sector, but it's about that we all can live in a better life. We can continue. LEC have been here for over 100 years now, if I can understand that. And we need to change the message around to see what can we do and how the private sector can be empowered. But honestly, it's very challenging. The people are still complaining.
So on that note, let's come to LEC. You know, long time ago, one of my mentors wrote an article during the Guinea crisis. There was a huge refugee crisis in Guinea, and everybody was going there and talking about how many people are suffering and so forth. And this article focused on what we were not doing, but how we were talking about numbers. And he kind of named it, "Statistics don't bleed, what people do." And so I want to bring that to you, all the huge numbers we're talking about here. Reducing tariff and doing all of these. What we're hearing from the private sector and from ordinary people is that they're still feeling the pinch, and that this is not an emergency. LEC, you know, every year we will have a dry and wet season. You know, during the dry season, your capacity is low and your demand is high. You know, during the dry season is when a lot of Liberians are able to do business, because that's when they're able to get out for longer hours and there's not rain that's obstructing business. What are you doing to ensure that the coming dry season will be better than this rainy season? I'm not comparing it to the last dry season. I'm saying better than this rainy season, because even in this rainy season, we're hearing you're doing load shedding. So what are you doing to make sure that the dry season, you're not going worse?
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Sakib talked about the expansion plans that LEC has on the table, supported by the bank mainly. So we talk about SP2, we talk about expanding the existing Mount Coffee. We're working right now to repair the units that got damaged in 2021. So all of this will increase our capacity. But again, they are all wet season plants. The dry season plants, we have two: expansion of solar, introduction of solar, and then expansion of imports. Because to be honest, for the near term, the only way we can meet dry season demand is from imports. Last year, our contract with Côte d'Ivoire, was for 25 megawatt capacity. We didn't get that. This year, our contract says 50. We are not getting that. And so we've reached out to our other neighbor, Ghana, and Ghana has committed to giving us 50 megawatts. That should be enough to meet dry season demand here, because we have thermal, 38 megawatt thermal. We have revived in fact, we have 3 sets of plants. Last year, we could only use 2. This year, we have resuscitated the 3rd one. So we have additional 10 megawatts to add to the 28 we had last year. And so we're ready for the dry season. We're working feverishly to get the power from Ghana. And again, we have the World Bank supporting us in making the arrangement. We have to go through Côte d'Ivoire. That is the only challenge. Ghana is willing, the transmission companies are ready, Transco is ready. Our only challenge here is bringing CRE to the table. So we have meetings arranged for first week of October, and last month, August, last month, we were in Ghana, and we have all the arrangements from Ghana in place. So we're working now on Côte d'Ivoire. So we're not resting, we're not sleeping on the job. We're doing everything we can to make sure that next dry season, we don't have the problem we had this year.
Thank you, Mr. Pepana. Don't be surprised when you see the newspaper tomorrow saying, for next dry season, LEC ready. So, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished guests, on this note, we would like to bring this to a close, but maybe before we close this up quickly, I will want to just go around to see if, for 10 seconds, if there are any last thoughts or passing comments that any of the panelists will want to part with. So let's start with the Honorable Minister.
Let me first of all thank the World Bank for organizing this event and for undertaking the study. I think it's an eye-opener for us as a government, and we see that there's still a lot of work that we need to do, and we stand ready to work with our citizens to make sure that is done. Thank you.
Go ahead. Thank you very much. I think we have demonstrated here that LEC is aware of its crucial role in the economy of Liberia. We also have a management team in place that largely know what they should be doing and are doing something about it. We need support from our partners, from the government, from the bank, and also from the private sector, because one of our challenges is the private sector stealing power from us and therefore weakening our financial position. So I will appeal to my friend here to talk to his business partners to support LEC, support Liberia. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. And I would like to take this time to say, World Bank, thank you very much. At least today, the LEC have committed itself that dry season will be like rain season. So thank you so much. And I will also, we promise you, we will also be there as a security to talk to our partners and friends and brothers to start doing power tests for LEC.
Thank you. And I would reiterate the same thing, but recognizing the past performance, but we all need to work together to make sure that we achieve what we aim for. Thank you.
So thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry we cannot do an interactive session because of time, but we want to thank our distinguished panelists, and thank you, Mr. Traoré, for canceling your flight and making this tells us how vested the private sector is in what's happening in LEC. Thank you all very much, and we'd like to bring this panel discussion to a close on this note. Thank you.
Let us call on Mr. Mohammed Wayi, our new senior economist for the Liberia Country Office, World Bank. Mohammed, please give us a closing remark.
Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for participating in this event. I congratulate the team and the panel member for very enriching discussion on especially on the electricity sector. I'm given this task to conclude by providing some key messages, and I don't want to be hated for delaying lunch, so I will be very brief, and I will focus on the messages which we have not discussed other than electricity, because we had discussed significantly on electricity. I will give you 4 messages from this report which I want you to stress. First of all, Liberia has grown over the last 3 years, and the outlook is quite positive. But we need to recognize that much of this growth basically was exogenous and was due to dependent on the global commodity markets. In a way, what report stresses is to find endogenous growth engines for Liberia to basically mitigate against volatility in the international commodity markets. So this is one key message. Second message that I want to stress from the report is that the fiscal fragility needs addressing, because fiscal fragility results in the macroeconomic instability, which has consequences for financing, which has consequences for debt sustainability, which has consequences for inflation, which eats into the purchasing power of common people, and it has implication for growth, because a very vulnerable macroeconomic situation results in, it negatively impacts the investment environment. So this is the second message, that the country needs to focus on the macroeconomic stability to maintain its desirability for the investor. Third key message is that the most of the FDI that we see in this country, and that's we receive significant amount of FDI compared to our GDP. About 10% of GDP is in FDI, foreign direct investment, but almost all is in the resource mitigating. Most of it is resource-seeking investment, where foreign firms come into the country for Liberia's minerals. There is not much investment in efficiency-seeking investment, where firms come to a country to benefit from the low labor cost or high productivity. There is not much investment in terms of market-seeking investment, where firms come to a country to seek growth potential and the market size. As the investment is concentrated in resource-seeking area, so there is very little spillovers, positive spillovers in the economy, in terms of productivity, value addition, in terms of improved managerial practices, and so forth. So this is one area where probably Liberia need to work on. And this comes to my concluding remark, which is that growth requires a coordinated effort. It's not one policy and ignoring the other area. In order to grow on a sustainable pattern, country not only needs physical infrastructure, that means we need investments in infrastructure, electricity, but we also need investment in human capital, because to grow, and the global experience tells us that much of the growth in successful countries come from labor productivity, total factor productivity, and that's only come through improved human capital, improved technology, improved managerial practices, and so forth. So I conclude these are the four messages, I think, from the report, which were not very much elaborated. I wanted to stress this. So I thank you all, and let's have lunch. Thank you.